Alex, thanks for having me back on. And one of the things I'm trying to do is just raise some awareness about the magnitude of this problem, because I think people have heard this a couple times over the years. Remember back in the early 90s, the government shut down for a couple of weeks, and there were some issues about, our debt's getting out of control. People were aware of the problem. But then it kind of goes on the back burner again, and now it's back on the forefront because the deficits are really soaring again. So now people are worried. But the problem is, from my point of view, Alex, is that the numbers have now gotten so large that there is no plausible way that we can ever repay the debt. And that leads our government to one solution, which is to print lots of new dollar bills to pay our obligations. The only way we can pay for them is by inflation. And just so you'll know the extent of the problem, if you look at the income tax and the corporate tax from the last year that was collected, that was the tax that the federal government got, if you doubled that, if you increased the actual revenues by 100%, it still wouldn't have covered our deficit from last year. So there's no way that we're going to be able to contain these deficits. And obviously, if you can't contain the deficits, you're never going to repay the principal. And the total liability today, right now, Alex, for all the government's debts and for all of the things the government has promised to give people, like Medicare and Social Security, all of our future liabilities, the total bill per taxpayer is now over $1 million. So how many of those taxpayers are actually going to ever be able to finance their $1 million obligation to the federal government, and how will any of that money ever actually get paid? And that's what I'm trying to warn people about. There is no way these debts can even be financed. And if you can't finance the debts, then you have to start printing money, and that's where we are right now today.
And the cartel that controls our planet, these big financial institutions that have run us in the ground, the Madoff, Ken Lay types, I mean, they could care less because they're going to be left with all the loot. We're going to be left with all the debt. I talked about quantifying it. You talk about it becoming clear that we've lost world reserve currency this year. About a week after you were on, the Russians and Chinese officially started doing trade between each other in the Chinese currency. We see gold and silver rocketing back up. I mean, when do you see it? I mean, you've pointed out the dominoes have already fallen. It's kind of like a corpse that's cooling off right now or starting to go into rigor mortis. But I mean, how do you see those phases? How do you see it becoming more evident? I mean, what's it going to look like on the street? What does it mean to the average person to lose the dollar's world reserve currency? I can't tell you how many people on the street have said, Alex, I see your show, I hear it, but, I'm not in the stock market, or why should I care? Why should they care?
Well, Alex, a great example of how this affects people every day in their lives is look what's happened to the price of gasoline just in the last couple months. It's gone back above $3 a gallon, at least where I buy gas here on the East Coast. And I think that's probably true nationwide on average. The gas is now above $3 a gallon again. How did that happen, Alex? Our economy hasn't grown. Demand for gasoline hasn't changed appreciably. And yet the price of gas has gone from the low $2 range all the way back over to $3.
Well, one of the top, I'm sorry to interrupt, Porter, but you're right. One of the top Shell execs said it's going to be $5 in the next year.
It will be. And what people can't. What's funny, of course, is the American people are going to rail against the oil companies, and they're going to blame them for higher gas prices. The oil companies have nothing to do with the global price of gasoline. That's set by the supply of oil, it's set by the value of the dollar, and it's set by the amount of refineries. They haven't built a refinery in the United States since 1975. So, there isn't a very large increase in the ability to convert oil to gas. That's one problem with the gas price. But by far the bigger problem is that the value of the dollar is collapsing. You see the price of gas go up by 50%. You see the price of gold double in 2 years. You see the price of silver triple in 2 years. When are people going to wake up and say, oh, you know what? There's some downside to all this quantitative easing. There's some downside to this creating trillions of dollars to bail out Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac so that Americans can still have cheap mortgages. There are downsides to this government policy of runaway debts and money printing to pay for it. And the number one way it's going to affect people is in the grocery store and at the gas pump. And I promise you, corn is at a new record price, and I'm sure the farmers think that's great. But you know what? There's going to be a big problem for a lot of people, especially the people who are on food stamps.
Yeah, a lot of folks say, well, I don't get ears of corn. Corn is a filler in almost every processed food.
That's right. And think about this. There are 40 million Americans today, not in the future, today, on food stamps. What do you think they're going to do when the price of food doubles again next year and they can't afford to feed their families? You think they're just going to sit in their government-subsidized apartments calmly while they can't feed their children? No way. You know what's going to happen. There's going to be a huge problem with crime in the cities and with people rioting and demanding more money for food.
Porter, I've got reports all over the country in major cities, doubling of rapes, doubling of robberies. I've got CNN articles today. It's already happening.
Yeah, and, these things are really, truly just the beginning. And people they have no idea what has already been baked into the cake. I mean, you cannot spend, if you're the federal government, next year you're planning to spend $4 trillion. $4 trillion you're planning to spend. You've only got taxes to cover about 25% of that. That's $3 trillion going to be added to our budget next year alone. Sooner or later, our creditors are going to go, forget it. We're not going to do this anymore. And then the only thing left to do is going to be totally to supply all that money by printing. Right now, the quantitative easing currently underway is $600 billion, which is a lot. That's why the prices of everything are going up. But when that $600 billion goes to $1 trillion in quantitative easing or $2 trillion in quantitative easing, things are going to get out of control really quickly.
Now, you also write extensively, and I'm reading over it, it's just excellent advice about ways people can protect themselves. And I know you can't individually diagnose people. You can just give them general systems that have really, worked in the past. You've got a wide range of, deep newsletters and analysis and information. People can find out more by going to endofamerica3.com and watching the free video or linking through on banners we have up on Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. But how do people protect themselves from this unraveling?
Well, you really have, there's three things that you have to do. Number one, you have to own real money, which is gold and silver. You have to own real money because as the global monetary system collapses, because it's all based on the dollar, as that all falls apart, gold and silver are going to be the only things that really hold their value and will allow you to buy anything else you need. And then the number two things are you have to invest in energy and agriculture because those global systems are going to be the ones that are most harmed by the ongoing inflation. Just one quick note, just to point out to you that what I'm saying is happening right now. If you look just in the last 3 months, shares of Monsanto, which is the big seed company that a lot of people don't like because they use genetic engineering in their seeds, and some people are very afraid of that. I'm not commenting on whether or not that's a good or a bad idea. I'm commenting on the fact that farmers around the world buy that seed because it's very productive. Their share price has gone from $45 to almost $70 in the last 3 months. There is no plausible explanation for that kind of a move in that big of a company unless you know that inflation is coming to agriculture.
Well, all the financial experts and economists we've had on have been saying for 2 years that this inflation was going to accelerate right around 2010, 2011. And now I see the headlines. 45% increase in rice, 50% in corn, 30% in this. I mean, it's going up across the board. And when I've studied hyperinflation throughout history, Porter, am I right in saying that the further you get along, the faster it moves?
Exactly, because the only way to deal with these rising prices are now going to cause more credit problems, going to cause more deficit spending. It's kind of a cycle that builds on itself, Alex. And, you can guarantee that the government's not going to say, no, we have to put a stop to this. We have to let companies go into default. We have to let banks fail. We have to stop spending money we don't have. In a democracy, that's never going to happen because there is no political organization that stands for sound money and sound policies. You've got the Republicans who want to cut taxes. You've got the Democrats who want to spend. And if you look at the deal they just cut last month, you see what did they agree to do? They agreed to cut taxes and spend more. That's exactly the opposite of what we need to happen, and that's the root of this problem. There is no political consensus in this country to have sound money and to have balanced budgets.
Well, still, if you talk to the average yuppie about having sound money, getting rid of the Federal Reserve, they laugh at you. It's a type of brainwashed, received knowledge to giggle at anyone that warns them. Again, even Glenn Beck gets attacked for warning people about this. And so we're looking at some people that are really going to be helpless. What do you predict they're going to do? I'm worried about the government forming them into a zombie army to push for total government, total taxation of the middle class to feed them during this crisis.
I'm not saying that you're wrong about that, Alex. That might happen, but what I'm saying to you is that that will not solve the problem. If you doubled the tax revenues from last year, we still would have had a deficit. You cannot solve this fiscal problem by raising taxes. It cannot be done. The only way to solve this problem is by drastically reducing the government overhead. And we both know that'll never happen in this country because more than 50% of the people that vote don't pay taxes. So there is no way this set of incentives, this structure we have right now in our government can survive. And the way it will be destroyed is through a massive inflation that is underway right now. As far as the yuppies laughing about people saying we need to have sound money, we need to have money backed by gold and silver, let me tell you what, it's the greatest lie that has ever been told. We convinced American people over the last 50 years that a piece of paper was more valuable and better than gold and silver. That is incredible. It's never happened before in history that the world reserve currency was backed purely by nothing. And people are going to learn an enormously painful lesson that you can't have money that's backed by nothing because pretty soon all you're going to have is nothing.
Well, I wish you were wrong, but history is replete with examples. Every economic indicator shows you're 100% right. And Porter, I have to agree with you, not because your information is like some type of crystal ball prediction. It's as you said. This is the facts. This is the reality.
Yeah, I wish I was wrong too. In fact, if your listeners want to look at the video I've made about all these issues to get to the details of it, you're going to see me saying repeatedly, "Look, this is the fact." I didn't make this number up. The U.S. federal spending really is $4 trillion, and total income tax and corporate tax revenue really is only $1 trillion. So all these numbers are there for people to consider. But the problem, as I see it, is that people don't realize that we are finally reached the point where you can't just kick the can down the road because the rate of increase in the size of these debts and the financing costs have become sort of parabolic. I mean, the total national government debt, the federal debt, has doubled since 2000.
And as you know, Porter, that's only what's due right now.
That's only what's due right now.
Not obligations. And for those that don't know, the website to see the free video is endofamerica3.com. And Porter Stansberry predicted the collapse of GM, Fannie Mae years before it happened. Freddie Mac and America's biggest mall owner, General Growth Properties, a few years ago. In fact, Barron's called his work a dire prophecy. And again, even the Wall Street Journal, many other publications, Kitco, say this guy's got some of the most accurate predictions out there. But as Porter has said, this isn't one of his big, complex predictions based on, a whole bunch of data. This information is all right out there in the open for everyone who wants to know the truth. And I happen to agree with him. There is not the political will or the education or the lobby out there that wants to stand for saving our economy. These are cutthroat offshore corporations that are all greedy to consolidate their bottom line, and out of crises, because they know what's coming, they're pre-positioned. They're going into all the raw materials for at least 5 years, into the farming stocks, into all these areas that we've been telling you to get into.